The Most Disturbing Cults in History, Part 4. Paul Schaefer was a Santa-slaying, one-eyed pedophile, torture-inducing cult leader who set up an imprisoned cult community in Chile. Following the end of World War II, many Nazi and Nazi sympathizers fled to South America to avoid persecution. But Schaefer didn't just flee Germany because of that. He was also under investigation for multiple counts of sexual abuse against children while he was operating an orphanage. He came in contact with the Chilean ambassador who invited him to South America. In 1961, he purchased a 4,400-acre ranch which him and his 10 followers stayed at. By 1963, another 230 followers migrated to the compound. Between 1966 and 1973, another 15 families joined them. Paul led his followers in the teachings of William Branham, who was also an influence on Jim Jones. Paul Schaefer, who was also a minister, claimed that during a meeting with Branham, he experienced a healing. Following that meeting, he began to strongly preach that all sin and illness was the result of demonic possession. Behind armed guards, attack dogs, and barbed wire fences is what he called Dignity Colony. Over the some 46 years that the colony existed, it became so large that it produced its own cheese, bread, and sausages. It even had its own state-of-the-art hospital, school, TV station, power plant, and even an airstrip. The cult members worked the land, with the opposite sex being forbidden to speak to one another. Children were separated from their parents and placed in their own gender-specific dormitories. Aside from being just a one-eyed Nazi pedophile, he was also known as the murderer of Santa Claus. A story spread that one December, all the children were excited about the arrival of Santa Claus. Schaefer had one of his followers dress up as Saint Nick and he pretended to shoot him in front of the children. Beatings within the colony were a regular occurrence to those who broke the rules. When dictator Augusto Pinochet came into power in 1973, naturally him and Paul became good friends. He allowed Schaefer to import and export without paying taxes and allowed the cult to continue operation without bother from the authorities. In return, Schaefer and his men would help train Pinochet's men in the art of torture. Because there was more to the colony than just what was on the surface. Underground was a series of complex bunkers and tunnels which were used for torture. Electrocution and psychotropic drugging were very commonplace for those who went against the colony or enemies of the state. One man, Wolfgang Mueller, managed to escape the colony a total of 3 times. The first 2 times he was found in a nearby town, brought back, beaten, and drugged. The 3rd time he managed to get to the German embassy, but he wasn't safe yet. Schaefer actually sent 15 armed men to the embassy to collect him. Thankfully, he was unsuccessful and Wolfgang managed to make it back to Germany. Schaefer insisted on being called the permanent uncle and would have his closest lieutenants deliver boys right to his room. Children and parents were taught that it was an honor to have them chosen to go into the bed of their supreme leader. Following the end of Pinochet's government, as well as testimonies of victims who had escaped the colony, an arrest warrant was put out on Schaefer. He staged a final farewell ceremony declaring his innocence before disappearing into the tunnels below. He was discovered 8 years later living in a nice gated community just outside of Buenos Aires, Argentina. During a search of his colony, the investigators found a military-scale stash of weapons. More than 100 assault rifles, 90 submachine guns, dozens and dozens of hand grenades, and even some surface-to-air missiles. In 2018, a mass grave was being excavated on the property to try to find those people who had disappeared over the years. They believe at least 300 some people were interrogated and tortured on the property. Now, you would think someone as evil and twisted as Paul Schaefer would easily get the death penalty, but this wasn't the case. In 2006, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for the abuse of 25 children, 5 counts of child rape, and had to pay $1.4 million to 11 victims. He died at